Has anyone else had an experience with performing this ritual? I came across it by sheer coincidence. I was wondering if anyone had found a way to escape the loop. If you're unfamiliar with the Stone Gate ritual, I'll do my best to fill you in. You may have passed right by the ritual several times and just never paid any mind to it. It's fairly easy to spot if you know what you're looking for, though. You cannot force it to happen. Either you'll happen to find a gate in your path, or you might just go your whole life without ever seeing one. The word gate, that is a little misleading though. All there really is to the ritual is 2 stones. As you walk around, just anywhere will do, I've come to find, you may notice 2 stones on either side of your path. These stones will be oval and they'll be fairly flat in shape. Their colours will be similar, but different enough to be distinct from one another. It does not matter if you're on the sidewalk or a hiking trail. The stone gate can appear anywhere. When you spot these stones and you wish to not partake in the ritual, you can simply pass right through them and you will suffer no consequences. On the other hand, if you do decide to involve yourself with the gate, as I did, then you can never stop. Standing in the middle of your path, there will be a stone on either side of you. All you need to do to begin this ritual is to choose which stone to pick up. It will be random each time, but these stones, they each have their own effect. One of them will grant you good luck if you are still holding it at the end of the ritual, and the other, it will give you bad luck if you are not holding it at the end. As I said, I happened across this ritual by happenstance. You see, I like to go jogging in the nearby woods. I try to make time for it every morning. It's how I justify all the garbage I shove down my throat. Whilst I'd just turned around to start heading back home, I stopped for a moment to take a drink. My eyes focused on the trail ahead, one that I had run countless times before. I noticed a pair of rocks resting just across from each other. Feeling cool streams of water travelling down my cheek after escaping the corners of my mouth, I pondered about these rocks. I wondered just how many times I had passed by and failed to notice them, or if they had just recently been placed there. They seemed far too picturesque to be an accident. The way the sun bounced off each rock, causing them to look kind of like headlights. The more I stood and stared at the set of rocks, the more transfixed I became on their sudden existence. Lowering the water bottle, I stepped forward with a sense of caution that can only come from ancestral uncertainty. With each step, the appearance of these rocks became more abnormal. Drawing closer, I came to the conclusion they arrived recently. Sitting perfectly on either side of the dirt path, undisturbed by anything and without a speck of dirt on either of them. One was a solid grey, whilst the other shimmered with the lighter tones under the morning rays. Kneeling, I ran my fingers across the surface of the right side rock, feeling its smooth and uninterrupted surface, a surface that was surprisingly cool to the touch. Surely, if it had been resting for long enough in the sunlight, it would soak some warmth in. But this thing, it was nearly frigid. I didn't want to interrupt the symmetry of these things, but the rock had such a pristine presentation. I could not help but wrap my fingers around it and lift it from the ground. Only the underside of this rock was sullied by fractional clumps of dirt clinging on. With a swipe, my fingers knocked the rolling grains of grime back to the ground. Twisting my wrist around, I observed the nearly hypnotic surface of this rock, it catching ever so gently in the beams peeking through the sparse trees. I'm not the see a cool thing and collect it type, but even so, I couldn't help but think the rock would be beautiful resting on a shelf. Even more so if I had both of them. So I turned to face the other rock, only to discover that it was gone. Curiously, I swiveled my head, feeling a wave of static run along my body, prickling my arm hairs up as I searched for this other rock. They had been so perfectly adjacent from one another that it should have been right behind me. But it was not. The forest was pretty quiet in the morning hours, and I heard nothing skittering behind me. Even if there was something or someone, why take the rock? Stepping out in the direction of where the other rock should have been, my eye was flooded by a white light. Raising my arm to shield my eyes, I peered further down that trail leading back home, and there it was. Reflecting the light into my eyes, almost as if it was beckoning me, was that other smooth rock resting on the left side of the path. Even though it was around 40 or so feet away, the way this thing bounced the light where it was resting, it was unmistakably the same stone from before. As a lighthouse can lead a ship to the land, I started pacing my way down the trail. My vision was so fixated on the other stone that I foolishly ignored the light trickling into my pupil. Without knowing what I was already in the middle of, that I had already thrown myself into the stone gate ritual. I couldn't have noticed it right away. With every step, the rock that my fingers were still clutched around was becoming heavier. I first really felt its effect when my once angled elbow had become straight, with my hand hanging down at my side. Stopping in place, finally free from the siren call of the stone still ahead of me, I was able to observe my surroundings better. More than just the aching that was starting to develop in my shoulder, I noticed that the forest around me was shifting. Or rather, it was becoming bleached. The color of the once firmly brown soil that made up the path, it was becoming flushed and dull. Green leaves were losing their vibrancy, and the tree bark was becoming a milky shade of what they once were. It was as if all the colors around me were being washed away. I took a few steps forward, this time keeping an eye on the world around me. Indeed, with each step, I lost a little more of what made the world around me so beautiful. More and more stark, black outlines were becoming more apparent. Not to mention, my grip on this stone in my hand, it was starting to loosen. Just as the world was washing away, each step made the stone I was holding heavier. My grip was failing. My finger strength, it was giving way. A few more steps was all it would take for the rock to fall from my hand. When the thought of dropping the rock where I stood crossed my mind, I was filled with an unrivaled sense of dread. Telling my fingers to just drop the stone felt like trying to pass through a solid brick wall. Some part of me, some firing synapse, knew that my safety was only assured if I could continue to hold that stone. Some part of me, it knew the stones were a pair that need to exist across from each other. I had already made it about halfway. If one arm had the strength to carry it that far, then two should have been enough to make it the rest of the way. There's no explanation for why I knew, but I did, that all I could do was keep moving forward. The weight of that stone, ever increasing each step, it became harder and harder. I was already halfway, but the half I still had left, it was going to take much longer. Even still, the brown dirt, it faded into a hazy grey, and the foliage lost all luster as this stone, it grew nearly unbearable. Then, another wave of static shuttered through my body. The feeling of being watched. Such a small stone at that point had accumulated a weight that must have exceeded my own body. Even with both hands cupping it and all my muscles working in tandem, I could feel my knees buckling. It became tough to focus on anything other than fighting it. I did manage to catch several glances though. As the colour of the world had nearly vanished altogether, all that remained was this thick black outline of trees and foliage. These outlines, they began to squirm. It was not as if they were being pushed by a harsh wind. They were waving back and forth. It reminded me more of those crazy straws than they did tall, proud trees. My knees were burning, and my back, it felt as though it was bound to snap. But my destination was finally within reach. Surroundings up until that point, they were mute, but as I got closer to the other rock, I heard a hungry chorus of howls perforate through the air. The squirming lines, they began to stick together, creating thicker streaks of black. Gritting my teeth, and with the backs of my cupped hands landing on the bleached soil, I dragged myself along. The weight of the rock at this point, it was too much for me. If the weight wasn't shared between both palms, I have no doubt bones would be shattering at that point. If I had to travel just a few more feet, I don't think I would have had the strength. With one last heave, I pulled my hands across the ground, feeling the specks of dirt digging in, ripping my skin, and I offered the world one last glance. So many of the lines had come together, forming one. It was a jagged line, jutting out in all directions from a central point that had more girth than any tree I'd ever seen. My feeling of being watched was caused by this. Somehow, I knew that thing was looking at me. And then, it was gone. All of it vanished, The forest around me flooded with colours and a vibrancy that seemed more intense than ever before. A crushing weight that took my entire body to move a mere inches was once again relegated to the expected weight of just a small stone. A small, smooth rock resting in the palm of my hand on the side of the path adjacent to the other rock. I slipped the stone from my palm and I placed it gently onto the soil. Despite the throbbing in my hand and the burning throughout my body, everything had returned to normal. Things had become better than normal. Upon returning to work that day, I discovered that I was being considered for a promotion, and I had gotten it. The pay raise was nice, and when I went out to celebrate that night, I ended up striking up many conversations with very lovely, very drunk women, one of whom slipped me her number. Everything after that trip to the woods had been coming up roses. I was on top of the world. Things just kept on improving. That is, until I saw the rocks again. I had stopped going for so many runs, but I still walked to work to keep some semblance of exercise. Stopping dead in my tracks, I begrudgingly noticed the two pristine rocks that were laying on either side of my path. Refusing to go through all that again, I just stepped past the rocks without so much as offering a second glance. It's not that my life went to shit after that or anything, but I could tell that things had stagnated, that I was no longer rising. I had plateaued. After you participate in the ritual once, you'll begin to see those gates everywhere. You can try to do what I did and just ignore them. However, every time you step through without picking one up, your world will shift. A slow, almost invisible change at first, but each time I passed through or avoided a gate without picking up a stone, my world would lose a little bit of colour. Around a week of avoiding the gates was enough to notice the change, and within another week, the feeling of being watched returned. Fearing what would happen if whatever it was watched me for too long, I decided to pick up a rock the next time I saw a gate. The next time I picked up a rock, the ritual progressed as normal. Only, instead of that rock getting heavier, it became lighter. It was like the stone was being pumped with helium. It would begin to try and pull my hand upwards. I thought it would be easier to fight than the rock getting heavier, but near the end of the ritual, it was becoming difficult to keep my feet on the ground. And that was when the rock slipped from my hand. I dropped to the ground, and I watched the small rock spiral away from me and into the pure white sky above. I had been so close, and still, it slipped away from me. That thing, as the seconds went on, it moved closer and closer. When I tried to get up and run, I smacked into a wall. I couldn't see anything though. It was all white, and I had no idea where I was anymore. As the undefined line got close enough to touch me, I heard the pitter of something hitting the ground, and the ritual ended. I thought that maybe I'd gotten lucky, but I was wrong. I already explained the rules, so you can already guess that my life fell into disarray. I lost a job, an unfaithful wife, and missed payments ensued. It all came down to me. It would continue until I picked the correct rock and dragged it to the end. That's the game you play when you take part. A life of extreme highs and extreme lows. The more rituals I complete, the more often I'll come across a gate. And it's so exhausting. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep up with this. Even when I receive the good luck, I can't enjoy it. I know that it will be taken away. Even more than that, I know now, even without performing the ritual, even if I get the correct rock every time, it is watching me, waiting for me to break down and give in. It's waiting for me to pass through the stone gate. One final time.